Hi, welcome back to this video. In the previous video, we have learned about the ancient practices of management, and in this video, we are going to reflect on the contributions and contributors that have contributed in the classical era of management, which is the basis of the modern theory of the history of management. We have learned from the early management practices in ancient times the challenges after the Industrial Revolution that has caused the need to understand the management in an organized way. Thus, a formal study of management began to rise in the 20th century. The classical scientific branch arose because of the need to increase productivity and efficiency. The emphasis was on trying to find the best way to get the most work done by examining how the work process was accomplished and by scrutinizing the skills of the workforce. Thus, we are going to reflect on the contributions of the classical era of management in this video. If we see that the focus of the contributions that were made in the classical school of this thought, they emphasize on rationality and work efficiency. The major contribution that had happened in this phase was three. It is scientific management, administrative management, and bureaucratic management. The major contributors of each of these concepts were F.W. Taylor, Frank and Lillian Gilbreth, and Henry Ghent. In the second contribution, which is administrative management, Henry Fayol contribution is notable, and in bureaucratic management, Max Weber's contributions is celebrated till date. So we are going to reflect on the general theories of management that has evolved over a period of time from the ancient management practices to a formal branch of study of management in this modern phase of the history. So the focus is more on the efficiency, and the prime focus of management activities is more on to bring solutions through some logic and rationality based on some scientific rules and principles. Let us learn the major contributions that had happened in the past in this era of management. Now, before we start, let us reflect on the contributor who is popular with the contributions made in the scientific era of management in the name of scientific management. With the advent of industrialization, the complex interactions of the development in infrastructure, economy, and the labor management relations became the central focus. The engineers were vital in developing and installing advances in technology and power, which became the prime source of information about the management practices. So we'll start with the contributions of Frederick Winslow Taylor. He was an American inventor and an engineer. With the advent of industrialization, the complex interactions of the development in infrastructure, economy, and labor management relations became the central focus. Engineers were vital in developing and installing advances in technology and power, which became the prime source of information about the management practices. F.W. Taylor was born in 1856 in Pennsylvania, and he died in 1915. And during his reign of his work and experiences in a steel company, which was a very successful company at that time, he started his career at Midwell Steel Company as a machine shop laborer, and he was promoted to various other supervisory roles, and then he later became a chief engineer also in that Midwell Steel Company. And during his tenure of his work, he experimented various kind of observations. He did so many experiments and studies which had become the notable contribution of the classical era. His major contribution that he introduced the concept of the time study at Midwell plant, which also formed the basis of his subsequent theories that he later contributed after that major contribution. Let's quickly look at the timeline where he started. In 1875, he went for an internship at the Enterprise Hydraulic Works in Philadelphia, where he learned the trades of pattern maker and machinist. And during his stay of that internship, he sympathizes with the worker because they were working in poor conditions wherein they had no standard of work measurement and incentive system. Plus, he admired the way in which workers used to take pride in their own skills. So that is why he observed the workers' conditions and also the importance of the skills that the workers possess. In 1878, he went to the Midwell Steel Company where he made all those observations and experiments, and he contributed so much to the scientific management thought. In 1883, he earned a degree in mechanical engineering from Stevens Institute of Technology, New Jersey. It was a system in which he did take admission in a homeschooling concept, wherein he only went to give exams because he was working in Midwell company during that time. And he conducted all of those observations and studies during this phase while he was earning a degree of mechanical engineering, because he had no systematic technical knowledge about the field. So that is why it was required for him to get that degree. And in 1884, he basically became the chief engineer at Midwell and completed the design and construction of the Noble Machine Shop. So this was a brief outline of his major notable incidents and events that had happened in his life. And he is a very, very notable name in the name of a management field, because he is also popularly known as the father of scientific management. He established the concept of time study, which is the basis of so many other contributions that were later made, not just only by Taylor himself, but also by the other contributors who were inspired by his work. So let us see what the scientific management was all about. Midwell established some kind of incentive systems to motivate people, which while he was doing his supervision role in the company, he observed that was ineffective. So Taylor observed a lot of things that were happening in a Midwell steel company, and because of that he was very curious to identify methods which can help the company to improve the methods of efficiency, and that can increase the productivity of people and can also motivate them to work, because they were not a good condition in which people were working. So that time Taylor observed that there were no work standards that exist in the company. The workers were working with no clarity. They had no idea of what are the parameters that identify their performance standard. Since they have no idea of that performance on which their efficiency is going to be judged, because there is no scientific way to identify it. So the workers were also distracted and they were not very focused, plus they had no clarity because of these kinds of lack of standards were there. There were random decision making were happening in the organization. The people had no idea what kind of responsibilities the workers have. There is no proper job descriptions, there is no clarity of the role which person is going to perform what duties and tasks. There was no right match of the person in task as well, which is, we could say, the essence of management, that it is main purpose is to put the right man to the right job. And this was something that was lacking, because there was no match. The people who are performing the role that they are performing, they may lack certain skills, they may lack certain kind of technical aspects which they, if they knew, they would have performed better. So this was something that was absent when he observed that the people are working, if whatever work they were able to get some earnings, people were working, they had no idea of whether they are suitable for the job, neither the management had an idea of the same. The decision basis was rule of thumb, the old practices, or just simply the hunch or intuition of the management, because they had no basis on which they can decide the decisions. There was no scientific way. So we could say the system was absence. And then we could see that the management worker relations were also absent. There were negative relations, we could say. The people had the wrong idea about the management, that they are going to manipulate, plus the employees purposely worked at slow pace. This also gives a kind of a negative connotation in the viewpoint of managers, that workers do not want to work. So basically there were other situations that were going around which made Taylor to believe that the system is ineffective, because the kind of a piece rate incentive system which was introduced by the Midwell to motivate people was considered as ineffective by Taylor. He considered that the job were not properly designed. There were restricted output because the management could force the workers to work slow for their own benefit, because they do not want to pay extra incentives to the workers, so they will cut the rate later when the incentives, if they are going high, if they are producing more, or workers will themselves work slow, because otherwise they would be out of work early. So it is like there were various reasons that the people were restricting their output, plus management was also ineffective in establishing a system. The company needed better ways to offer incentives, because that could only motivate people to work better and work efficiently. Otherwise, because the system was that whatever number of quantity they could produce, they can earn. Otherwise, it's like their presence, the kind of a system that was later introduced, It was because that the people are present and they are just coming to work. So by the end of the day, they will earn some wages, and this kind of system basically made the workers lazy. In addition to that, they refused to follow whatever has been instructed to them, and they resisted the ways management want to instruct them and direct them to work. That if they should ask them to increase the output, they refuse to do it because of this fear of getting no job later, or maybe working harder for no additional benefit to them. So basically the incentive system that was existing at that point of time was not sufficient enough to motivate people to work better and improve their performance, and also to motivate them to incorporate their efforts much. So basically the relationships were also not fine between the management and the laborers, and this basically was not a kind of a scenario in which the effectiveness could be brought in. So these were the things that were disturbing Taylor, and because of this, that he was curious to observe certain kind of scenarios and phenomena which later became the basis of his contributions that he did to the scientific management era. The first of the contribution that he brought in was the time and motion study. Well, he was observing to identify a full and a fair day standard of each task, because this was the major concern of Taylor, that there is no standard of work. There are no parameters that can identify that how the performance is going to be measured, what are the rates on which the performance output is going to be remunerated. So there was no system. Also, he wanted to identify that how fast and how better a job can be performed, so that the load of a worker could be reduced. Basically, he was focusing on the well-being of a worker as well, simultaneously, in addition to motivating them to work better, so that the purpose of an organization of producing an output could be served. To overcome this kind of experience that he experienced when he was in the supervisory role, and he tried to put some kind of fine so that the workers could produce more output, he experienced that the workers basically resisted, and they basically retaliated through jamming of machines and all of that. And to overcome that, Taylor initially incorporated some kind of fines, and he put certain kind of fine system to punish the workers. But this later will only resulted into some kind of bitter experiences, and to overcome this kind of system, he decided that he is never going to use the concept of fines and punishing employees for not performing. So this was something that he never wanted to go on this path of punishing people for not working. Rather, he wanted to establish a kind of system in which people will cooperate and will consider the system as effective one, so that they will follow it. So basically, all of these kinds of situations in the background led him to identify better methods to find out the standard of the task that the people perform and how fast and how better they can do. So from the ideas of Charles Babbage and Adam Smith, which were descriptive in nature related to the division of labor. So they basically suggested the idea of how the jobs can be broken down, and it can later lead to specialization. This idea was taken by Taylor in a dual perspective. The two major aspects of the Taylor's contribution, which made this division of labor concept as his original contribution, in terms of the analytical aspect and the constructive aspect. There are two dimensions to the contribution which the Taylor had made related to the time and motion study. Now from the analytical point of view, if we see this technique of division of labor, they basically focused he basically focused on breaking the job into small parts, in simple parts, so that the people will understand the task and they will perform it efficiently and in a better way. Because if you simplify the process becomes easier for people to follow. So basically he observed that how we can break the job in a simple part, and we can remove the useless parts, or we could say we can remove the waste activities from that kind of simplification. Because if you go and perform a task, you may do a lot of redundant activities, or maybe some kind of repetitive actions a performer may perform. But if a task can be demonstrated in a manner in which it can be ideally performed, that was the idea of developing this kind of time study. And he broke the job into some simple parts to observe that how we can reduce the redundancy and the wastage of the steps that were unnecessary, so that it can be removed. In addition to that, it can help to identify the best and the quickest method to record each of the part and observe it, that how the skilled people are performing it. That means the people who are skilled and able to perform this job are how they are performing it by reducing it and doing it in a quicker way. In addition, that movements were recorded, and also the certain kind of percentage was also added later of certain given factors. Now, what are these given factors? The given factors could be, we could say that many a time there are unavoidable delays. Sometimes a person came late and he started the job late. Some kind of interruptions happened, maybe mishandling of the machine, some kind of a slip of a kind of a certain element, or maybe a worker is new at job and there's a new environment in which he is working, or additional rest pauses. Now, these are certain factors which may vary from one person to another person. So, these factors are also natural. A person may take a rest pause more than the other person, but at least the task that he had to perform should be clear. The job is divided into simple tasks, and the unnecessary part was removed, so that everybody has the clarity of what is the basic standard of performing a job, while the natural factors are somewhat which may apply to person differently. So, given that percentage, and given that kind of exception to the situation, a kind of a time has been observed, that how much time this activity will take by given a percentage of these kinds of random factors as well, which may vary from one person to another person. The time of the activity of its performance was observed, and in this way the ideal time to perform and deliver a task was recorded. This became the major notable contribution of the time study, in which he recorded the time to perform a particular job by giving ample space of the natural differences that may come across between people to perform it, and this kind of contribution became a kind of a path-breaking contribution in the scientific management. In addition to this kind of element, there was also the constructive element of specialization, which obviously helped to conduct future studies by Taylor, in which this kind of observing the task will help in carrying on this kind of experiment to other contexts as well, other different kinds of job, that this kind of study or an experiment can also be performed to other types of job which are not at the shop level, let us say at different level, and in this way a kind of an observation of identifying the standard of work could be defined. So, basically this led to improvements in the tools, the machines, the methods for the ultimate standardization of the all elements surrounding a job. The time study is an art of observing and recording the time required to do each detailed element in an industrial operation, while motion study refers to the study and analysis of the movements of an operator while performing a job, so that the unwanted part or element or activity could be removed from the process. This became the major contribution of the basis of the further contributions which Taylor made, and it identified a fair day standard of each task, wherein he divided the job into simple parts, removed the unnecessary part, observed that how much time this activity is taking, and giving a percentage of factors of those random differences that may happen between one person to another person, and this gives us a kind of an idea of in how much time this kind of job can be performed, and this became the contribution that we popularly understood as the time and motion study. The other problem that Taylor observed was the bitter relationship between management and the labor, and Taylor was too much advocating the role of the better relationship, the harmonious relationship between these two parties which are working for the benefit of the output of organization. Now, in this, Taylor advocated a complete mental revolution on the part of both management and worker. And by mental revolution, basically he referred to the kind of the attitudes of the worker and the management towards each other. Basically, he focused the importance of the harmony and the cooperation between two parties, that if they are working for a unified goal, this relationship also has to be positive. If the management tries to impose certain kind of fines, certain kind of punishments, certain kind of restrictions and a strictness in the system, it is only going to result in retaliation and stoppage of the work, which is not the purpose of an organization or management. While at the same time, if the workers do not trust their management, if the workers do not believe in the philosophies and ideas and the decisions of management, it is very difficult for them to trust them, follow them and get a certain kind of guidance or counseling. So it's basically a two-way process that has to be harmonious in nature, and this is what he referred to as a mental revolution for both the parties, and it talks about the positive attitude from both. It has three aspects, this mental revolution, in which all efforts for an increase in production, it is like no matter the efforts are being coming from the management side or from the worker side, but it has to be come in a harmonious manner that could only lead to improve performance and increase the production. That means the output must be generated in the best optimum manner. When we talk about the other aspect, it is the creation of the spirit of mutual trust and confidence, which is the essence of any successful organization. The organization will be only successful if there is certain kind of harmony between the parties who are working together for the goal attainment. And of course, developing a scientific attitude towards the problem. Taylor was strongly advocating a basis, a logic, a rationality of decision making in place of the hunch and the intuition that were used to play a major role prior to bringing this scientific solution to this problem. Taylor suggested that management should try all the best methods wherein they could identify how jobs can be performed better, how they can be standardized, how not only the jobs that can be standardized, but also the tools, the equipments, the material that you are using to perform jobs, because all jobs are not same. The jobs can be of different nature. When you're talking about converting and transforming a raw material into a finished product, there are various stages through which a job has to go, and every job has its own nature. And because of that nature, the tools, the techniques, the methods, the procedures are different. And the Taylor suggested the management that to identify these differences and then creating a standard way to measure the task and performance and how the output can be remunerated. All these should be based on certain kind of scientific basis and not rule of thumb or any old or past practice. There has to be a logic behind the decision making, and this is what advocated strongly by Taylor, and that is why we call it as a scientific management. The third kind of suggestion which Taylor made is the functional foremanship. In this kind of contribution which Taylor was making, he was focusing on the improvement of the quality of supervision. Now, if a single person supervises the activity, he was not able to do that because there are two aspects of supervision also. One very important aspect that Taylor recommended is the planning part. It's like the strategy making, that before you delegate something, you plan it better, because until and unless the planning part happens, its execution becomes difficult. And while at the execution time, the kind of technical expertise, the kind of technical vision to look at the task, and also having the ability to demonstrate the same to the worker so that the expectation could be met. These are two different important aspects of supervision, and this is what has been suggested by Taylor through the contribution of functional foremanship. It basically wanted to focus on how the improvement of supervision could be made. So he suggested that the workers should be under 8 specialist foremen, and how he divided the differences between the planning in charge and the production in charge. he separated planning from execution, and in that he focused on certain kind of roles of these 4 supervisors at the planning level and these 4 supervisors at the execution level. If we see under the planning in charge, the 4 different roles that he suggested, that the one role is of the route clerk who specifies the route of production. That means when you are planning that in how many stages and how many elements the job will be divided, there will be a route that you will be proceeding to, going from step 1 to step 4, for example, if it is broken into 4 parts. So that route also has to be specified. That will be the responsibility of the route clerk, who will let you know the route of the performance of the task. Instruction card clerk will specify and draft the instructions for the workers that how this route will be achieved. The time and cost clerk will prepare a time and cost sheet, because that will give an ideal standard to perform the job within the specified time of performance, because it's not only the task that has to be complete, but also in how much effective time and within the budget, without going for the wastages and reducing all that element of wastages and redundancy, the task must be performed. So this is a responsibility of time and cost clerk to give those restrictions of time and cost. And a discipline officer is required to ensure that these all activities are performed with strict discipline. And the role under the production in charge that will be responsible at the execution aspect. Here the role are divided into again 4 parts. The 4 foremen will be the gang boss, speed boss, repair boss and the inspectors. The gang boss will be the one who will be keeping the machines and tools ready for the operation of the workers. He will ensure and check that whether the machines are right, whether they are working, whether there is any technical glitch or not. The speed boss will take care of the time and accuracy of completion of the job at the time of execution, which is different from the time and cost clerk at the stage of planning. Repair boss will ensure proper working conditions of the machine and tool when the process is on, and the inspector will be checking the quality of the work, the way in which the execution is taking place. In every stage he will ensure that the quality is met and he will check the standards. So he must also be aware of the quality standards. The third technique he suggested is to develop an effective incentive plan, and what he suggested was a differential piece wage system, which was different from the established system at Midvale, which he considered as ineffective in the initial step only. In a differential piece wage system, basically he suggested a technique in which the differentiation between an efficient and a less efficient worker could be identified, and in addition to not to punish workers but to motivate them. That was the major ideology. So the purpose was to also motivate the less efficient ones so that they could improve. The differential piece wage system is actually working on 2 dimensions. The one is not to punish, and the other major aspect to develop this kind of plan is to motivate people. Motivate those who are lacking in producing the output to a standard output. They must be motivated. Now this dual edged solution was working in a direction in which the wage system had 2 piece rates, in which there will be a high rate for those who are reaching to that standard output and producing the output either to that level or more than that, and the ones who are producing or not able to produce it to the standard output will be given a low rate. Now these differences were enough for the inefficient workers to motivate and perform better in future. Let us see this piece wage system through an example. Let us assume that the standard output per worker per day is 100 units. And in case a worker is able to produce more than this standard output or equal to this standard output, then he will get a remuneration at ₹4 per unit what he had produced. While in the other case, if the person is unable to meet this standard output, the rate of remuneration will be ₹3, which is lower than the one who is performing more than the standard output or at least equal to the standard output. Let's assume there are 2 workers who produce different quantities of the output. Worker A who produced 110 units and worker B who produced 80 units. Now 110 units are obviously more than 100, and if we talk about 80 units, obviously it is less than 100. Now in this case, the worker will be remunerated at rupees 4 and he will earn rupees 440 in comparison to worker B who will only able to earn 240. Now if we could see that the difference in the units produced is only 30 because worker A produced 110 units while worker B produced only 80 units. The difference is only of the 30 units, but the remuneration that they are getting in terms of wages is different and the amount of difference is rupees 200. The worker A is getting rupees 200 more than worker B. In this way we could understand that how the differential plan worker B will be motivated to reach to the standard performance in future. So next time when worker B will be going to perform, he will be trying his level best to get more of the wages by improving his performance and increasing the output. So there are two purposes which are being solved here. One is that the worker had an opportunity to work extra and gain extra by improving the performance, but they also have a standard output that if they are able to reach the standard output, which is the expectation of the management, in that case they will be cooperatively working towards this direction to at least reach to the 100 or you could say reach to the standard output, if not increasing that standard output. So the fear of the workers of working hard for no extra gain or getting out of job, both of these will be solved with this, and also the motivation element is present in this kind of wage system in which the workers are fairly remunerated for their efforts and are directly proportional to their strength and the physical efforts and the intellectual efforts that they are incorporating into the process of converting raw material to, you could say, a finished good, or let us say any process of production. So the job will be performed on the basis of certain scientific criteria which is accepted by the people also, that it is not just the whims and fancies of the management, but it is selected based on certain kind of scientific method, and this is the right way to perform a job. So in this way we could say that the management and the labor relations will not become bitter because both have an idea of a scientific solution to a problem. Now, the Taylor's argument that could serve both the workers and management, that could improve efficiency, was that there has to be certain kind of scientific approach to decision making and work allocation, in which he identified that how the task standard should be defined, how the workers and their basic decisions related to the workers will be taken, and the basis should not be just intention of a manager or any kind of a intuition or any kind of a past practice on the basis of which management is saying randomly, but he is doing it on the basis of certain scientific approach, like there is a rationality of decision making and not just a rule of thumb method. So the major argument that Taylor made to improve the efficiency also and the relationship of workers in management also is that there has to be a scientific logic and a rationality behind decision making, whether it is related to policy, whether it is related to work allotment. There also has to be a scientific method in which you could train people, you can teach people, and you can develop people. So when you are just randomly asking people to increase their performances, it will lead to nowhere. But if there is a scientific way to let them know that how the task can be improved, how the task can be performed better, the people will be positively understanding and will be ready to contribute. That is what the contribution of Taylor is, that there should be a scientific way in which you also not just train people but also select them. So their recruitment and their selection should also be based on understanding the requirements of the job and not just randomly putting people into work and forcing them to work in the industry. So basically it is about putting the right one at the right job and giving them the right tools so that they can perform better and the efficiency can be improved. Another important aspect that Taylor stressed too much by when they were talking about the relationship, that the relationships has to be cordial. If the management and workers are not on the same page, then it is going to be detrimental for the organization. In this way, basically he talked about the responsibilities and the task will be divided equally between the management and the workers, so that no party will feel that the other party is manipulating the situation, or there has to be equal division between the roles and responsibilities so that everybody will share the responsibility of the organization and the goal attainment process. Another thing that he focused on was the productivity has to be higher, the production output has to be higher at the lower cost, and because of that he suggested the time and motion study that helped the workers to devise better incentive method, and also how people can be motivated to contribute their efforts through a scientific manner. So basically the Taylor's contribution to this management field is shifting the unscientific method to a scientific approach, wherein there is a logic behind a decision making and not randomness or any past practice, wherein the managers do not have any idea of that what person is performing what task, plus how they will perform the task. So there has to be certain kind of a system that should be established, and that is why the contribution of Taylor is notable in this direction, that he suggested a kind of a basis of decision making and made it scientific and logical, wherein certain kind of practices, certain kind of activities can be aligned. The other contributors who were notable in scientific management era were Frank Gilbreth and Lilian Gilbreth. Frank Gilbreth was a construction contractor by trade. He gave up his career to study scientific management after hearing the Taylors speaking at a professional meeting. And Lilian Gilbreth was a psychologist by profession. She studied work to eliminate inefficient hand and body motions. They were husband and wife, and they studied job motions. They were inspired by the work of Taylor, and based on the ideas of time study and motion study that they were performing through a bricklaying experiment, they basically contributed to scientific management. The Gilbreths were interested in workers' productivity, specifically that how movements and motions affected efficiency and welfare. They were also supported the ideas of Taylor of reducing the wastage and the kind of irregular or unnecessary movements from the process of doing a task. Gilbreths used films to analyze workers' activity, where Taylor observed the kind of actions of the workers while performing a task. They basically used the films to record the videos, and they could break the task into discrete elements similar to the time study, and recorded the movements the time it took to complete one element or one task at one time. And the films were useful for creating training videos for further instructions and for training new employees. So their contribution was very helpful, and it was complementary to the contribution of Taylor, wherein they used the recording of the videos of performing a task and then use it later to instruct employees how they can improve the work productivity. So this is basically a kind of a complementary contribution with Taylor, and they were inspired by Taylor. Another contribution that was made by Henry Gantt, who was an associate of Taylor and obviously inspired by his work. So he made two notable contributions to the classical management. One was the Gantt chart. It was a kind of a bar graph tool which he contributed, and he also introduced a task and bonus system as an incentive system. The Gantt chart was a tool which provides a kind of a visual graphic representation of what occurs over a course of a project. For example, how you are moving from let us say step 1, what will be the activities, step 2, what will be the activities, step 3, and so on. These kinds of visual pictorial representation was a kind of a suggestion which Henry Gantt suggested, that this kind of visual graphic representation will help to suggest a sequential performance of the task which made up a project. This kind of differentiation between a terminal element and a summary element will help to give or paint a larger picture of the task, and it will give more clarity to the performers. The related terminal elements together will create what we could say the whole job or a summary of a job. It is like when you see a pictorial presentation of a task, you are able to get an idea of what this whole task is all about and how it proceeded from one stage to another stage. So this kind of vision will be very required for the people who are performing the job, because they will know it at every stage, that how the task is getting planned and how it is completed at each stage of the production and the progress of the task. The additional contribution that they made was of the task and the bonus system, which was also known as the progressive rate system. This was preferred by people who want to work more and they want to work harder to gain additional benefits. However, the contribution of Gantt is not best known to the classical management theorists, but most of his ideas are still being used in project management concepts today. So thus we could see that in scientific management, the focus was on rationality, the focus was on improving the efficiency of performance by getting to know the task better and having an idea and a standard of performance and the performer. In addition to that, the relationship was also very much propagated by Taylor and also the people later who supported his ideas. So the Gilbreths were also focused on improving the efficiency, and they additionally provided a kind of a solution through a films recording through which they observed how the task is performed and how it can be helped further for training purposes. Later, the Gantt chart will also be a kind of a contribution that helps in project management techniques, especially wherein it is important for the team to know that how they are progressing from stage 1 to other stages, whatever stages are there in a period of time of a production of a task and performance of a task. So these contributions made by Taylor and the people who were inspired by them, the Gilbreths and Henry Gantt, they were together known as the classical contributions of scientific management, whose focus was on improving efficiency and workers' relation and how to better remunerate people, and having a standard and a logical way to define task and define the aspects and essence of performances. And also to have a scientific method of decision making, whether it is related to policy, whether it is related to task, and to find out some standards of the measurement of performance. This was the focus of the scientific management. Let us see that how the scientific management is used in organizations today. So whenever we see any kind of application of the time and emotion study, which is the focus of the decision makers, that how they can improve the productivity and how they can eliminate the wasted motions, this is useful, we could say, application of the scientific management, and it is also very essential for the contemporary organizations, especially in the current times when we are seeing that the technological revolution has brought in a lot of technology and people are working with machines, people are again working with robots. Now how to work with robots, how to work with machines, how to work with different softwares, how that task will be performed. In this kind of a scenario also, we could say there is a huge application of time and motion study, which again will be reinvented, or we could say which again is required in the contemporary times to re-look from the perspective of working with machines, because we are again coming back to the era of wherein the people will be more working as a blended workforce. In addition to that, if we are talking about any scientific method in which we are selecting people, in which we are training people, so the process of this hiring, if it is going through a scientific process, basically we are applying the concept of scientific management, which is of course applicable till date. And whenever we are trying to design certain incentive systems in which the kind of incentives and the remunerations and the compensations are based on the productivity of a person, we are actually referring to scientific management subconsciously. So scientific management is applicable till today, and because of technological revolution, I will mention that it is more applicable today to focus on these contributions that were made in the 19th century, but they are still in practice and they are still important and relevant. So they hold the test of time, and we could say that scientific management, however it is more rational, however it is more logical, and it is more focused on the performance part, and the humanistic part is related to the relationship between the workers and the management, which is also holds its purpose for the purpose of goal attainment. But the concept of scientific management is applicable in the contemporary times as well. So whenever we are applying any of the principles of scientific method of decision making, of people selection, of deciding the policies and rules and how the incentive system, we are actually talking about scientific management and application. Thank you.